Hello everyone, welcome to Abhigyan Academy once again. So as we were discussing various concepts of economics, so today again after the lecture of different phases of economic cycle where we have seen expansion, boom period, recession, depression and recovery. So today I have brought an exclusive video on the types of recovery. Okay, what are the different types of recovery can happen in an economic phase? Okay, after recession or after the depression, when the economy will recover, okay, what are the kinds of recovery it can there can happen? So, like the first one is the V-shaped recovery. Now, in recovery, what we have to see? We have to see okay, how the GDP is declining and the time taken by that GDP to recover back to a particular point. All right. What are the two things? First thing, how the GDP is declining means how fast or how slow the GDP is declining, and number two, how fast or how slow and or how many times the GDP is recovering in a particular period. That is known as types of recovery. So in V shape. You see here in the first point that we have to see how the GDP is declining. The GDP is declining in a very short span of time. The GDP is declining very quickly. The GDP has fallen very quickly. Okay, and from a particular point, the GDP has not fell, but again with a very pace, with a good pace, the GDP has again has done its bounce back. So GDP fall very quickly, GDP bounce back very quickly. Okay, and this timing and this graph resembles the letter of the alphabet, V letter of the alphabet. So the name kept by the economists is a V-shaped recovery. Now, a stretch from V-shaped economy recovery is K-shaped recovery. Just see this part, and if I just cover this part, you will see that the GDP fell very quickly, and this GDP has also recovered very quickly. But in some situations, what happened? Ki as we know, the economy is classified into various sectors like primary sector, secondary sector, and tertiary sector. Few sectors recover quickly after recessionary period, and few sectors it does not recover that quickly. So there becomes a divergent economy. Like all the sectors have fallen very quickly, but from that this point, this part has recovered very quickly, but there are few sectors which has not recovered as quickly it should be. So there is a divergent. So one is going upward, another one is relatively very much stable and not recovered that much. Okay, so again it is resembling the letter K of the alphabet, and so the name is K-shaped recovery. Now comes the L-shaped recovery. Now, what happened in this L-shaped recovery? The GDP fell very quickly over a period of time, and and in a particular period of time, the GDP didn't fall. Also, the GDP didn't grow, or there is a very negligible growth that we hardly can say that the economy has recovered. It is taking a very long time to. It is taking or it will take a very long time to reach this point again. So relatively, the recovery graph, the recovery graph is comparatively is less slanty and more flat. See here, it is less slanty and more flat. From this point, it has recovered, but it's very negligible. To reach this point, it will require more time. Hence, it is resembling the letter L of the alphabet. So the name is L-shaped recovery. So the all is about the time taken by the GDP to recover. Now, fourth one is the U-shaped recovery. Now, what happens in this U-shaped recovery? The GDP falls quickly or comparatively slowly, but the GDP falls. Now, from a period, from a period, the GDP neither falls, the GDP neither grows. The GDP is not going down, the GDP is neither going up. That means up to a period the GDP is stagnated, neither falling nor growing. And after a period when things started working, the GDP has again started going upward. Again, I am telling the GDP has fell up to a point. Then from that point, for a certain period of time, the GDP didn't fell, the GDP didn't grow. Up to that, after that, the GDP started going upwards. It is resembling the letter U, hence it is U-shaped recovery. Next comes the W-shaped recovery. Now it is very interesting. What happens here? Here the GDP falls two times. The GDP recovers two times. First, in the first part, the GDP falls up to this point. Government or the central bank takes policies. In this point, the government or the central bank, it takes certain policies, certain monetary policies, certain fiscal policies are taken, and then things started working and the GDP started going upward. But in when this point is reached, or this time is reached in a particular time, the policy taken by the government and central bank, the policy fails. This policy fails and then the GDP started falling. The GDP fell again. Sometimes the GDP, the second time when the GDP falls, it fall lower than the previous fall. Okay, previous fall. So again here, the GDP, again the central bank or the government started taking policies, some new policies, some unconventional policies. If it works, then the GDP will again grow. So here the GDP fell two times, the GDP has recovered two times. Hence it is known as W-shaped recovery. So these are the different types of recovery that we can see in an economy. So here we complete our economic cycle. In the first video, we have seen the different phases, and in this today's video, we are seeing the different types of recovery. What we have seen: W-shaped, U-shaped, then L-shaped, K-shaped, and V-shaped. So these are certain things that can be asked in your examination in the economic section. So thank you so much and stay tuned. Best of luck.